we'll start with a disclaimer that some of these warning signs of anxiety, depression, there can be some overlap actually with COVID symptoms right now. So you want to make sure you're ruling out anything medical first. But a common symptom or indicator of anxiety is actually aches and pains. And the reason why is when we're experiencing that stress, our body definitely starts to kind of tense up a bit and our muscles definitely start to constrict. So as a result of that, our body can start to experience more of those pains. There's a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms that go along with anxiety too. So early indicators of that, or just symptoms of that, can be diarrhea, they can be constipation and nausea. Dizziness can also be one of those physical early indicators, also with chest pain and a rapid heartbeat. Even when it comes into your immune system. So when you're also going to be experiencing more stress on a consistent basis, it really can lead to our immune system not really operating in the way that it properly or that normally would. So that's where we can even start noticing that like we're getting more colds or feeling more run down on a consistent basis can also be another indicator here.
Yeah, that is an extremely powerful point. Something I talk about a lot with my clients when we're talking about GI issues. Yep. And how powerful, just think about that, how powerful the mind is. Your mind is your most powerful muscle that you have in your body because you think it and a cascade of events happens in your body. Hormones are released, different enzymes and enzymatic reactions occur. There's a whole plethora of things that happen as soon as you think it. So that thought isn't just a thought. That thought is a movement that's happening within your body.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, kind of talking and wrapping all of those early warning signs we talked about so far, sometimes the behavioral ones are what we notice or what's brought to our attention by other people, because those are most observable. So some behavioral warning signs that we kind of notice and look out for are you eating more or less? You know, your appetite fluctuates depending on, you know, and that is going to vary person to person. Again, all of this will to some extent, but, you know, you might find that you're eating significantly less and, you know, losing weight when you're not trying to lose weight, you know, so it's not going on a diet and losing 10 pounds. It's, you know, you aren't feeling hungry and you're just not eating. Yeah. On that side as well, sleeping more or less, like your sleep is drastically going to be kind of affected at times when you're feeling anxious, going back to those racing thoughts. You know, those feelings of restlessness. So that's really gonna kind of impact as well. You know, we touched on isolation, but behaviorally, you do isolate a little bit more when you're feeling anxious and depressed. And it maybe sounds ironic because you think you might actually reach out and seek people when you're feeling that way. But you do, going back to those automatic negative thoughts, you know, you start to have some of those that say like, you know, don't reach out, people don't want to hear what you have to say, or people aren't going to be there for you, or have a burden. You know, there's a magnitude of things that we can tell ourselves when we're in that midst of anxiety and depression. So what we do is we isolate and we kind of keep to ourselves. And that it's hard because it makes us, it kind of increases a little bit those symptoms then.
You bring up another really good point too, Caitlin, with your energy levels and just feeling like you're sleeping more and having that exhaustion, just like when we were saying before about what happens when you're physically stressed, emotionally stressed, and the amount of energy it takes for your body, like we talked about, what you think, then becomes a cascade of events, which then requires energy. And when you're not taking as much nutrients from a nutrition standpoint, then your body is actually has less of a chance to fight off from what you were saying before, Kailey, about and from the immune system, but also just to be able to require that sustained energy to maintain higher levels of activity during and throughout your day.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, you might also notice that you start to procrastinate more or just completely neglect your responsibilities. So I know Kailey and I were thinking of ways to kind of demonstrate that. And within the group, you know, I've had the pleasure of kind of looking at it the past couple days, and you guys are a great community. And so maybe if meal prepping is something that you've always found that was enjoyable and helpful, and then all of a sudden you notice it's not something that is high in your priority list anymore, you're not just doing it, but enjoying it. You know, that can also be a sign. You know, things that we might overlook as being insignificant can really tell us a lot. When we have all of these symptoms that we're experiencing, at times we we can turn to coping mechanisms such as, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes. We either were engaging in that beforehand and we notice an increase, or you've never really been one to partake in that and you notice that that's the only way you're kind of getting through the day is through some of those coping mechanisms. Also behaviorally, some of these more what we might think of as typical anxiety, nervous habits, but like biting your lip, biting your nails, playing with your hair, there's a lot of, again, warning signs that we sometimes overlook is just being there and being normal. That can really be indicative of you going through something.
And it definitely goes into, though, when we're talking about this and when we're trying to kind of go through and understand, okay, well, when's an appropriate time for me to reach out? Or is it time for me to seek additional support like counseling for the first time or return back to counseling? There's this concept of just knowing that everybody has their own threshold of distress. So what we mean by that is if we're looking at it like on a scale from like 1 to 10, 10 being like our limit, our breaking point, what we're capable of handling, with what we have been having going on for the past 10 months with the pandemic, and then also with the holidays approaching, I'm sure a lot of us have been operating kind of closer to those higher numbers, like at the 7 or at the 8 or at the 9. And we're operating there for maybe days, weeks, months at a time. And the toll that that takes on your body, or the toll of operating that fight or flight response, can definitely be depleting mentally, emotionally, physically, cognitively. And when you're at that point where you're at that like 8, 9, 10 number, it's really only going to take that one additional thing that can put you past your point. And that's where they bring in the saying of it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, because it really is. When you're at the 9, you don't have that much room left to be able to cope with additional stressors, to where now you're at your 10 or beyond that 10 limit, and you're in this position where you're overwhelmed and you just don't know what to do anymore. So that is definitely that time where you can look for additional support. You can implement these different coping skills that we'll talk about later, or you can reach out and seek counseling for the first time too. So that is something to kind of get a gauge on when you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, is it time or is it not time? Just to be aware of where your own threshold of distress is really at and monitoring that for yourself.